We change and we make choices in life. We've been told perhaps many times that by ourselves, because of looking in the mirror, that we can't, that there's no hope for us, and that we're worthless, and all those things. And Satan tells us those lies, that we're so bad that God doesn't love us. And good morning, everyone. I hope you've had a wonderful week so far this week. We're ready for another edition of our class, Is God Still With Us? I know we often wonder those things, and there really is a biblical basis for answering the question whether God is still with us. That really depends on us, not on God. God is always the same. In Hebrews chapter 1, verse 10, it says, "You, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the works of your hands. They shall perish. They shall grow old like a garment. As a mantle you shall roll them up, and they shall be changed. But you, O Lord, are the same, and your years shall not fail." God never changes. God does not move. God does not change his position. But we change, and we make choices in life. And today, when we think about the book of Ezekiel and where we're studying, in the 37th chapter of Ezekiel, there's the famous story of the dry bones, which we'll cover at a later time. But God can breathe new life into us. God can help us change our lives. And we are the primary factor involved in that, because we choose every day what we will allow God to do in our lives. In the book of Ezekiel, God never stopped wanting his people to return to him, even though he poured out his wrath on them for what they had done. I want you to know in our lesson today from Ezekiel chapter 18, that today, right now, whether you're in a crisis right now in your life, whether you're going through terrible times, whether you're on top of the world, it doesn't matter. Today, you and I have the power to change our story. Every one of us in our life has a story. How will that story end? Well, we have the power to change that. We can't change the past. None of us can. But we can change what we do from this day forward, and that changes the way the story is. Will you take the initiative? Will you have the courage to make the choices you need to make in order to change your story for the good? In Ezekiel, the 18th chapter, the chapter begins like this. "The word of the Lord came to me. What do you people mean by quoting this proverb about the land of Israel? The fathers eat sour grapes, yet the children's teeth are set on edge. As I live, declares the sovereign Lord, you will no longer quote this proverb in Israel." That proverb sounded like the fathers did something wrong, and therefore the children are going to suffer for what the fathers did. And of course, that can happen in some temporal ways, but God wants to make it clear that he does not hold us responsible for the sins, for the evil of our fathers or our forefathers. We don't inherit Adam's sin. We don't inherit our mother's sin, our father's sin. That's a false teaching that the Bible simply doesn't support. In verse 4, God says, "For every living soul belongs to me. The Father as well as the Son, both alike belong to me. The soul who sins, it shall die." Now, there's several great teachings in this verse, Ezekiel 18, verse 4. First of all, every soul belongs to God. The reason for that is God is our creator. God made us. From that first man that he breathed into and breathed the breath of life into, and he became a living soul. From that time in Genesis 2:7 until now, God is the creator of souls. God is the creator of individual, volitional, thinking, choosing people. And each one of those souls belongs to God. Now, Over the years of my study of the Bible, I have thought about, the soul, the inner being of man. What is that really? It's certainly not something physical. It's something spiritual. It's called the spirit many times, or the soul. What is it exactly? Well, my view is this. The soul has three essential parts. In the very center of the soul, you might call it the nucleus of the soul, there is the will of man. The will is a free agent, a choosing, volitional agent. The will is that which chooses. And we are free to choose what we will do. So the will is the nucleus of the soul. Around about the will, there are two influencing factors rotating around the will, trying to make the will choose one thing or another. One factor that's part of the soul rotating around the will is the intellect. The intellect, the thinking part of man, takes in all kinds of information, and based on that information tries to rationalize decisions. It tries to make decisions based on information. So the intellect tries to influence the will. But also flying around the nucleus of the will is the emotions of man. Fear and anger and pride and all of those strong feelings, very volatile, lust, all of those different things. And those strong feelings are also trying to influence the will to make certain decisions. So the intellect is processing information and trying to influence the will. And the emotions are feeling strong things and trying to influence the will. But ultimately, it's the will that is the core of the soul. And that's why, since God created the soul with a will, with a choosing volitional part, that soul is accountable for that soul's choices, because that soul can make his or her own choices about what they do in life. And isn't life a series of choices that we make every day? Some of them bad, some of them good. But no matter what bad choices we might have made in the past, we can make good choices in the present. And that making of good choices makes all the difference. In the book of Ezekiel chapter 18, he talks about different individuals being accountable, and he uses the illustration of a father and a son and then a grandson. Look at verse 5, Ezekiel 18 and verse 5. Suppose there is a righteous man who does what is just and right, who does not eat at the mountain shrines or look at the idols of the house of Israel, who does not defile his neighbor's wife or lie with a woman during her impurity. He does not oppress anyone, but returns what he took in pledge for a loan. He does not commit robbery, but gives his food to the hungry and provides clothing for the naked. He does not lend at usury or take excessive interest. He withholds his hand from doing wrong and judges fairly between man and man. He follows my decrees and faithfully keeps my laws. That man is righteous. He will surely live, declares the sovereign Lord. This is the description of the grandfather in this scenario, and he's a super good guy. Now, we know that everybody does wrong, but this is the picture of a person who's really trying to do right. But look at verse 10. It presents another individual, a separate individual. I'm not the same individual as my parent. I'm a different individual. I'm a different will. Verse 10. Suppose he, that is this grandfather, has a violent son who sheds blood or does any of these other things, though the father hasn't done them. He eats at the mountain shrines. He does defile his neighbor's wife. He oppresses the poor and needy. He commits robbery. He does not return what he took in pledge. He looks to the idols. He does detestable things. He does lend at usury and takes excessive interest. Will such a man live? He will not. Because he has done these detestable things, he will surely be put to death, and his blood will be on his own head. See, he's personally responsible. We're not responsible for somebody else. We're responsible for ourselves. All of us are. Verse 14 presents the grandson. But suppose this son, see, the one that was not like his father, he was a wicked man. But behold, suppose this son, verse 14, sees all the things his father commits, and though he sees them, he does not do such things. And then it gives you a similar description to the grandfather. Drop down to verse 17 in the middle. He will not die for his father's sin. He will surely live. But his father will die for his own sin because he practiced extortion, robbed his brother, and did what was wrong among his people. You know, many of us out there may have had terrible parents. Some of us were blessed to have really good parents. But it doesn't matter, because what our parents were or were not does not determine who we are. We still have choices about how our story will be written in our life, and there's hope in those choices, because we can make a good life and we can make good choices, and the future can be bright for us depending on what we choose and whether we're willing to trust in the Lord. So he says in verse 19, this is Ezekiel 18 verse 19, yet you ask, why does the son not share the guilt of his father? And then drop down to verse 20, because this is core. This is a core verse in our discussion. See, the people of Israel and Judah had long been living in rebellion against God. And there were a few righteous souls in there that were trying to do right and were penitent of their sins. But by and large, they had long since turned their backs on the Lord. And the Lord was sending the Babylonians, and he was about to besiege and burn down the city of Jerusalem, and all this stuff was going to happen. But in this chapter, God is trying to get his people to look forward. He's trying to get his people to see that it's never too late to make good choices, and that we can't change the past, but we can change our relationship with God and our relationship with other people and the way we live our life in the future. So verse 20, he says, the soul who sins is the one who will die. The son will not share the guilt of the father, nor will the father share the guilt of the son. The righteousness of the righteous man will be upon him, and the wickedness of the wicked man will be charged against him. So, we are not charged with anybody else's mistakes. We are responsible for our own mistakes, our own sins. But even our own sins, and we need to understand this, are not something that will drag us down and make us unacceptable before God if we're willing to make different choices. There's never a time in our lives when we can't begin to make different, better choices. We're never too old to change. Some people say, I can't change. Yes, you can. God can help you change. God can transform you depending on the choices that you make. There's so many examples in Scripture of how God changed lives and is still changing lives. Notice there's two ways in which we can change. Look at verse 21. And this was Ezekiel's special appeal to the people of his day. But if a wicked man, somebody who's been living the wrong way, somebody who's made stupid mistakes, somebody who's made all the wrong choices, somebody who's made a mess out of their life. There's so many of us at one point or another that have done that. Maybe you're in that mess right now. But he says, if a wicked man, verse 21, turns away from all the sins that he has committed and keeps my decrees and does what is just and right, he will surely live. Well, you mean there's hope? Of course there is. He will not die. None of the offenses he has committed will be remembered against him. Can you really do that, God? Because of the righteous things he does, now he will live. Do I take any pleasure in the death of the wicked, declares the Lord? Rather, am I not pleased when they turn from their ways and live? David fell into sin with Bathsheba. He had Uriah the Hittite killed. But he turned to God in repentance, and God forgave him, took him back. Everything was better. The prodigal son left and wasted his inheritance, and he was dumb, and he did all kinds of crazy things, and he messed up his life. But he decided to change, and he went back home to his father, and the rest of his story was written in a much better way. Paul was persecuting the church and killing Christians, and he said, I was before a blasphemer and a persecutor and a violent man, but I obtained mercy because I did it ignorantly and in unbelief. And he goes on to say that if Christ Jesus could have mercy on me, the chief of sinners, then he can show mercy to any of you. So wherever you are in your life, wherever we are as a people of God, whatever mistakes we've made, we can choose. We have the power, the freedom to write a better story, to make better choices, starting right now, today. Verse 24 says, if a righteous man turns from his righteousness and commits sin and does the same detestable things the wicked man does, will he live? None of the righteous things he has done will be remembered because of the unfaithfulness he is guilty of, and because of the sins he has committed, he will surely die. There are two ways in which we can change. Number one, we can get tired of making wrong choices and living in a sinful way, and the guilt that's associated with it, and all of the self-hatred and everything that goes with it. We can get tired of that, and we can simply choose a better path. It's that simple. We can simply turn to God. We can simply let God accept us again and walk in a way that is pleasing to him, make better choices, and his grace will cover us. It really is that simple. But the other way we can change, we can get discouraged with trying to do right. We can look around at the wicked that prosper. We can start believing that it's futile to try to do the things of the Lord, and we can give up doing the right things, and we can start making stupid choices, and we can turn our backs on the Lord and be lost. And we can choose that as well. And sadly, some people do. But the point of this lesson is in Ezekiel 18. For those beleaguered children of Judah, those beleaguered people who were about to go into captivity for 70 years, and everything looked so bleak around them. The point of this was that they could start that very day making better choices, and they could write a different story. They could claim a different future from that which they had had. So, what will you do? I want to encourage you today to see your possibilities through the windshield, and don't be bogged down looking through the rearview mirror. You look back at that rearview mirror, and many of us are focused on that rearview mirror, and you look back and you see all the stuff we've done, and all the mistakes we've made, and all of the sins we've committed, and in some cases all of the people we've hurt, and all of the stuff that's back there, and it's so overwhelming, and we just feel so worthless, and we feel like we're nothing, and we feel like there's just nothing to be done. But looking in that rearview mirror is a death sentence, basically, because you can't change one thing about what's back there. You can't change any of it. You can regret it. You can grieve over it. You can do all those things, but you can't do anything about any of that stuff back there. But God wants us to look in the windshield, because out the windshield, out front, out toward the future, the possibilities are really endless depending on the choices that we make. There's a new story to be written. There's clean pages to be written on, where we can write good deeds, where we can write good relationships, where we can write good choices, where we can write things we can do that will benefit God and benefit other people. We can choose that possibility. And as we're driving down the road, looking out the windshield, remember that we never lose the power to make choices. We can choose the roads we take, whether we'll turn off on certain roads. Now, there are some roads that we can see meeting our highway out there that we really shouldn't choose to take. This road that you see in the picture is a rut road in Wyoming. And if you don't have the right vehicle, if you don't know what's out there, many of those would be better not to choose to take. And we ought to realize that there are many roads, there are paths that are coming into the road of our life that through experience we should realize I don't need to take that road, because it's very likely that the bridge is washed out down there. It's very likely that the vehicle will get high-centered and we'll get stuck. It's very likely that we'll blow a tire on a rock, or we'll meet a mudslide or whatever. There's all kinds of possibilities, but that's not a good road. And so we need to choose as we move forward just not to go down those roads that we know are going to cause trouble in our lives. Just choose to stay on a safe road, stay on a good road. And that's what we need to do. So in Ezekiel chapter 18, verse 25, listen to what the text says. Yet you say, the way of the Lord is not just. Hear, O house of Israel, is my way unjust? Is it not your ways that are unjust? If a righteous man turns away from his righteousness and commits sin, he will die for it, because the sin he has committed, he will die. But if a wicked man turns away from his wickedness he has committed and does what is just and right, he will save his life, because he considers all the offenses he has committed and turns away from them. He will surely live, he will not die. Yet the house of Israel says the Lord is not just. Look at verse 30. Therefore, O house of Israel, I will judge you, each one according to his ways, declares the sovereign Lord. Repent, turn away from all your offenses, then sin will not be your downfall. Rid yourself of all the offenses you have committed and get a new heart and a new spirit. Hey, this is key stuff right here. We need to get a new heart, get a new spirit. You know, we've been told perhaps many times that by ourselves, because of looking in the mirror, that we can't, that there's no hope for us, and that we're worthless, and all of those things. And Satan tells us those lies in our ears, that we're so bad that God doesn't love us, and all of those types of things. And we hear that over and over because we're looking in the rearview mirror at our mistakes. We make excuses. We blame others. You know, it's because of my mother, or it's because of my father that I can't change, or it's because of my boss, or it's because of my friend, or it's because of my wife, or whoever it is. But what we're doing when we do that is we're robbing ourselves of the power that God wants to give us to really move in a new, good, better direction in our lives. And we can do that. How do we do that? Well, he says here we have to get a new heart and a new spirit. How does that happen? Well, the only way I know that happens is to not only look through the front windshield, but begin to put our trust in a good and gracious and just God, a God that is always ready for us, a God that will help us, a God that has been there all along for his people, a God that can strengthen us with power by his Spirit in the inward man, a God that will listen to the sincere prayers of people that want to turn to him, a God that will help us walk the way that we choose to walk if we want to walk the way of righteousness, a God that will breathe new life into our dry bones, as Ezekiel chapter 37 says. Paul said, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you might approve God's will, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. Paul said, put away as concerning your former manner of life, that old man that is corrupted after deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and put on the new man, which after God has been created in holiness and righteousness of the truth. That new man is created by listening to God, by believing God's truth instead of Satan's lies, by trusting in God, by putting one foot in front of another and choosing to trust God enough to do what He asks you to do, to make different choices. That's a new heart. That's a heart that's full of hope. That's a heart that's full of trust. That's a heart that sees the possibilities that lie out there ahead of us if we will choose to serve the Lord. So Ezekiel 18 and verse 31 says, rid yourselves of all the offenses you have committed and get a new heart and a new spirit. For why will you die, O house of Israel? You know, the prodigal sat in the pig pen. Why will you die, O house of Israel? What am I doing here in the pig pen? I need to get up and go back to my father's house. Say, why will you die, whoever you are out there, who are wallowing in the pig pen of looking in the rearview mirror and seeing all the mistakes of the past? Look at the possibilities. Go home to your father, and God will bless you and make you live. He says in the last verse of Ezekiel 18, for I take no pleasure in the death of anyone, declares the sovereign Lord. Repent and live. In the book of Daniel, in Daniel chapter 9, I believe it is, Daniel prayed a prayer. He was in captivity. He'd been in captivity many years, and it was during the time of the Medes, right before the Persians came to power. And in Daniel 9, verse 4, Daniel prays to God and confesses his sins and humbles himself before the Lord. We have to realize, all of us, that we need God desperately in our lives. And so he does that, and he admits all the mistakes of the past, which God already knew about. And at the end of his prayer in Daniel chapter 9, verse 17, listen to Daniel's prayer. Now, our God, hear the prayers and petitions of your servant. For your sake, O Lord, look with favor on your desolate sanctuary. Give ear, O God, and hear. Open your eyes and see the desolation of the city that bears your name. We do not make requests of you because we are righteous, but because of your great mercy. Oh, believe in that, church. Believe in that. God is great and merciful. O Lord, listen, said Daniel from the depths of his heart. O Lord, forgive, said Daniel with sincerity. O Lord, hear and act. For your sake, O my God, do not delay, because your city and your people are called by your name. Now, the next part is what's thrilling to me, because in the book of Daniel, like in Ezekiel, God had poured out his wrath upon his people, and his people were humbled, and some of them wallered, but Daniel was looking out the front windshield, trusting God, seeing the possibilities. Look at verse 20, Daniel chapter 9, verse 20. While I was speaking and praying, confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and making requests to the Lord my God for his holy hill, while I was still praying, Gabriel, the man I had seen in the earlier vision, came to me in swift flight about the time of the evening sacrifice. And he instructed me and said to me, Daniel, I have now come to give you understanding. Verse 23, as soon as you began to pray, an answer was given. Hey, if you make the choice to start making different choices, if you choose God, which you can today, you're empowered by God to change your story anytime you want to. If you'll do that, and if you'll humble yourself and pray and really seek the Lord, he'll answer you. The angels will be sent, and he'll minister to you. In Joshua 24:15, Joshua pled with his people. He said, choose you this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You have the power to choose. It's never too late. It's never too bleak. Our sins are never too dark. It's never hopeless. You have the power to make choices that will change the story of your life. God will help you do it. Today is the day that the Lord has made. God gives you the power to change the story. Will you have the courage to do it? I pray that you will.